Welcome everyone to our March meeting. It's already March. Time seems to be going by fast for this year anyway. Seems like 2020 went forever. 2021 has started to speed up a little bit. Thank you all for participating and also sharing in our live stream event here as we continue. We're still under pandemic, at least under North Carolina rules by the governor right now. So we'll continue to abide by some of our current requirements and maybe talk a little bit about that tonight or Thursday night. So with that, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and I'll ask if there are any adjustments to the agenda. Okay, if not, I'll ask for a motion to approve our agenda for the briefing tonight.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
A motion is made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion is made. Received a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. First item on the agenda is general business. Comments from myself and council. Start with Mr. Now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just got two questions, and when I say I'm just throwing them out there, maybe our town manager can get me answers, because the person that I'd really like to ask the questions to is not here right now. Speaking with Councilwoman Williams, I was just advised, most likely, 99.9%, we're gonna have a horse show sometime in either April or May at the Airedale County Fairgrounds. That's good for us, but bad for us, because when I say bad, Councilman Bryant, probably 2 years ago, in 2019, going into 20, when everything got canceled, asked our police chief for a plan for traffic, parking, and pedestrian crossing. So if this show is gonna take effect in April, it may be not time that we have our April meeting. So I feel that we really do need a plan from our police department on addressing the parking, the citizen safety crossing the street, and traffic. And my second question is along the lines of the police department again. After our annual planning retreat, which again, everybody echoed on it, it was fabulous. I thought it was very well presented. But I just kind of wanted to know, the police department had Officer Baumgartner here explaining a citizens police academy, a children's police academy, and picnic with police officers. Is that really, is those things that are in this packet here, is that the things that the police department is really trying to get through and pass for 2021? Because all our other departments kind of set their goals. Adam needed this, and Emily needed that, and Steve, when I say needed, I don't mean needed, suggested this and whatnot. So if that's really all the police department's asking for the budget, not that it's easy, but, it cuts down a lot of different things.
I will address the first thing, Councilman, now is, yes, it's my understanding in speaking with a couple folks, the horse show is absolutely supposed to be tentatively scheduled for April if it can get done. The town has an application process that Mr. Beachy, not the original one, but the son of the original fellow, Mr. Beachy, will follow up. And I spoke with one of the county commissioners. They're supposed to get up with me sometime this week and town staff to fill out that application process and fill that out. Once they do that, part of that process is to fill out what all they will be doing, which will include doing the parking and all of that. We will absolutely follow through with that. and yes, sir, I'm familiar with the directive previously of the police chief to come up with some type of a plan for crossing and parking, and we will absolutely do that and follow through. As far as the presentation from the police, I've already had a couple email exchanges with the police chief. We are not through with our conversation there, and I will hopefully have you a more direct answer before, if not by Thursday for sure, as to what the presentation was or the rest of what was expected.
Thank you. Mr. Wyatt?
Yes, sir.
I'm good, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much.
Harris?
One question I have, Emily's not here, and I was just wondering, and you, Sally, make an answer. The, on the agenda for Thursday night, it named the area for the complex as Comer and Friends.
I have that information.
Why would we not add Jan, her name to it? I mean, I
have
just
that
thought it was
information.
like, out of Jan Comer, but Comer kind of sounds like it's leaving something out of her, you know, not recognize her cover.
I have that information.
Okay.
Emily is on vacation with her family, and I have that information to present it for Thursday. And your question was, why is it not what? sir?
Jan Comer, and her first name, and it just goes, I mean, that's, recognizes her particularly.
Well, the reason that was is when we had when they had the rec advisory committee, as Sally can tell you, she was there, and she specifically said she did not want to be singled out. She refused to
So
be.
she don't even accept Comer and Friends, because it just, I thought, she's done so much, you know.
It's her suggestion to put Anne Friends.
Yeah, the Ann Friends is fine, I'm just thinking,
Right.
why not her first name?
She doesn't want to have the sole recognition. She just feels there's been a lot of other people involved with it, and she just doesn't want the sole recognition.
I know she's done it,
She broke down in tears when it was recommended to be called the Jan Comer Complex, actually, and broke down in tears, saying she refused to accept that. And there were several things discussed by the committee as to why it should be called the Jan Comer Complex.
that's what I would, I thought, well, it should be, at least her name in front of it.
And then she conceded by saying that she would accept it as Comer and Friends.
So, it's a compromise to get her to be recognized. Okay, I was just curious as why we didn't put her first name on there with that, Ann Friends. And the other thing I'd just like to say that, I know Duck's mentioned in the past about having us go with him on a radio show. I went this morning, it's a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, I hope it didn't embarrass us too much, but I say it gives us output so that, you know, if sometime he's not available, so we have to go, at least we feel a little bit more comfortable. But Mark Singer made it very comfortable there.
I actually received a text that said one of our citizens was listening to the radio show, and that they thought that it was a great show, including the old guy that was on there with the councilman.
Oh, so what, the other way around? But anyhow, just letting you know that it is really a good time there. I mean, and we had to showcase our talent a little bit there too, so that was pretty good.
Thanks for stepping up to do that, so.
Enjoy it,
It's a
and
great
look forward to the
opportunity.
next time, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. Good deal. So,
No, already been taken care of.
okay, all right.
I like to say I've done that, George, and it was a little apprehensive to begin with, but once it's over with, it was like, well, that's not so bad after all.
Well, see, I knew when I went, I had Doug, and Doug, he'd always be something to say.
Right.
So I knew I just had to fit in good every once in a while, so it worked out great.
And just to touch on something that Councilman Now said, I just want to put this out there about the horse show. Whether it happens in April, it happens in May, or it doesn't happen until November, I think we should be proactive and have something already in place
Yes, ma'am.
by the police department.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Harris?
I just had a question about, you had stated in one of the reports that you were stepping up to be the, not spokesperson, but in charge of the Tally Street, sidewalk.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Do you have an update on that?
Yes and no. I spoke with our state senator a couple hours ago. She's actually the Transportation Committee Chair for the state of North Carolina. Excuse me. DOT still has a shortfall of funds, is the first issue. This project was approved back in 2017 initially, and we have several citizens, like all of us in this room, that are upset as to why that project has not come to materialization. And to some of them, it looks like some projects have got to the front of us. So
Right.
to give the full disclosure, if I may, to kind of explain what some of those have happened. Some of those projects are funded differently, and some of those projects were started differently. So and again, ma'am, I'm not trying to give the 20-minute version, but to full disclosure part to kind of explain what some of those were. This was a CRTPO project in its initial stage, and when it first went through, it quite frankly scored a 0 when it went through that project in 2016. And it was because the way the project that was presented when it went through back then is the reason that it scored a 0. We as a town and the council and the employee at the time with the planner repackaged that project and took some advice from Bill Thunberg, who used to be with Mooresville, and took some classes and repackaged that project because that particular street on Tally is very dangerous. If anybody don't believe it, try to walk through there, especially now. And there was some studies done using the police department and traffic flow and everything, and it was repackaged. Well, when it went back through, and the mayor was instrumental in his going through back then with the CRTPO, as the mayor's our main person that goes to that committee meeting, and Mayor Pro Tem goes in his absence. It was resubmitted, and then it went from a 0 to one of the top scoring projects, which is basically a formula back then, and the mayor can correct me, I'm sorry I don't have those notes with me, but it's basically a town pays a third, and then the formula from state and federal funding is basically 2/3, somewhere in that ballpark. So that particular project is around $1.6 million total, and the town would have wound up paying around $550,000 with the state and federal monies paying the rest. Off the top of my head, that was the ballpark. And that's the way it was supposed to have been, and we were supposed to have gotten everything done with the engineers coming from the state and the rights of way and everything supposed to have then happened. Well, then our personnel changed, and then the next persons that we got in charge, it wound up getting scored by DOT. Nothing to do with the town. It got bumped a year. Had nothing to do that we could have done anything else. Well, we already had projects that were in the pipeline at the same time, which was the project going up to South Iredell. There was funds that was already there, just like this, that was coming from state and federal monies. And they got approved, and they had already been scored. Well, once they got approved and funded, then that project got finished. But that was in the project for 5 years that it took it to get through. And I can't remember another project that we had, but there was another one that came in there also. But once it got funded and done, I'm sorry, it was the paving projects that we had all through the town. There were several that was in there that were put out for bid and bond package that all got approved at the same time. But it was separate money that the town put in together, where we was not waiting for state and federal money. It was what the town had done because of the priorities of the streets projects that they done, and decided to put all them together. So they went and bid them out. The cost of paving come down. Ironically, it went from $4 and something a gallon in gas to almost half price, and we were able to add 2 streets into that were not on there because the gas prices came down, so petroleum came down so much, so they were able to add a couple more streets in there to get done a lot quicker than originally projected. So the town said, go ahead and add those streets to it. So from the citizens' perspective, all they saw was, wait a minute, these streets got added and ours is on the waiting list. And in reality, that's not the case because the streets have been on there to get done in a while. When we had several, in Inglewood, Short Street was one of them. I can't remember some of the other streets that was over there. Stark Street. There was another one inside of Inglewood that were really bad that had been paved once, but the asphalt had already been cracking, that went in and had to be repaved, that got added to this project once the streets needed to be. Stark was one of those that basically was a messed up driveway with the way it was done, but because of the way all this had been done, they got paved and upgraded. But it was a town paved finance project, and it didn't come from state and federal monies. So that's how those projects got done. It's just that certain citizens seen them done, not the whole town per se. Then back to this one, it got kicked off again, one more year by DOT. Again, the town didn't have anything to do with it until 2019. And of course, DOT shortfalls with funding that they found out that they were, we majorly had overspent money that they didn't have. So then the governor come back and seized all their funds and said, no more, no more, no more, unless it was way out there. Well, we had personnel leave, and then once we had to have a full-time person that was in charge of the project, that's when we found out that the planner we had at the time had subbed out our DOT projects, and he was not doing that himself. So once that happened, then they said, okay, we gotta get somebody to handle it. So Jonathan found that part out, and nobody was handling it. So once that got in place, once I got here, council had asked back in the winter from our previous manager, hey, what's the deal? He got the answer. Once I got here in January, filled out the paperwork, we submitted it back in January. We're waiting on them to say, I can be that guy. That paperwork was submitted, and I brought all that up to our senator's attention today to expedite the process. DOT still has not started releasing certain projects. So to fast forward that long explanation of everything, that's where we're at, and I gave her the project number, and her staff will be checking into it to see where it is in the pipeline. But they have, to her understanding, started releasing some of the DOT projects. So we hope, being this one has been in the pipeline for 4 years now, and I am that person that's here, that it will get released. But DOT has changed some of the formula funding, so where we was at 33%, we think this one's actually at 40% now. So that will change some of the funding. Instead of it being like 540 some thousand, it may be 570 some thousand now, would be the Troutman's part. But it's definitely a priority to everyone on council and the town, because if anybody, like I say, has tried to go through there, Ken Reed, most of you all are familiar with Ken, said not too long ago, he was there and he had to actually jump plumb across a ditch just to keep from getting struck by a vehicle. And no offense to Ken, but he's like me, he shouldn't be jumping too many ditches. Don't put that in the paper, Ken will shoot me.
It's on video.
Sir?
It's on video, don't worry about it.
Appreciate that, Mayor.
Thank you for that explanation, I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else, Ms. Harris?
No, that's all, thank you.
Actually, on my list was one of the things that you started to talk about, I guess related to Ms. Harris. I guess periodically we got an update on where our streets were. I assume council would like to, at some point, revisit that. And so the streets that we've completed, the ones that we've done, and the ones that probably, after this winter, we need a update and maybe do a reassessment of. So that's something that you all can maybe take a look at and maybe update our street project, because that really should be ongoing. So um, you know, after cold weather, we start to see potholes and all that kind of good stuff again. So I'm sure people will start to ask, you know, where we are on some of these projects. So
Okay.
just so that we're up to speed as we think about the budget coming up. Also, you know, if there are some that are absolute critical that we need to think about, we need to at least get those in the pipeline.
Okay.
Doug, check with Todd on that. He worked up some for us a couple, 3 years ago. And we worked off of these that you just mentioned, Felina, a while ago. Worked off of, and we're working down a list from one to, you know, not needing as much repair, and obviously that's several years ago, so that may not necessarily be the case, but that's a good place to start at the very least. You know, I suppose starting from scratch at square one, you know, talk to Todd, I would suggest.
Yes, sir.
Another point I'd like to, you know, just bring up really is around, and maybe this will be a topic of conversation. I don't know. Maybe we need to reach out to our congressional members again, but sounds like the stimulus bill is close to being passed, and as I understand it, there are local funds in there, and so getting our name in the hat, if you will, for some local funds would be great as well. So, and we can talk more about some of the detailed things that we might need, but I know that's part of the bill, somewhere around 130 or 60 billion dollars. So we need to be thinking about that for sure.
Yes, sir. Also, for council's knowledge, I got an email toward the end of the day Friday, still trying to sift through it to see what may be. It's one of the flooding that Etta, I believe it was, that came through last year. And I showed it to Councilman Harris when he stopped by Friday. A lot of times, once they come through with some of those FEMA type grants that comes through, it's for certain things, but if all of those monies don't get applied for, then they open it up just a little bit. But some of that in there was, we even though our town did not have direct issues due to the flooding, there might be some possibilities with the way I read that we can apply for certain funding there. But at this point, maybe is all I can say, but it's a short window of opportunity that we can apply, if so, and I'm absolutely looking through that to see. But it was not lots of money, but just like some of the soil issues we have in our park, or could have, especially in the nature trail area, to where we've talked about some of the flooding issues. We may need bridges built, for example. Like I say, not a lot of money, but it still would help us from having to spend funds, even if it was such as building a natural bridge type thing in that area. It's worth looking at to see. But again, some of those you almost need an attorney to fill out the paperwork for, and if that's the case, it may not be worth our efforts. But if the paperwork is any more simple than normal, then it may be worthwhile. But I will check into that along with what you're talking about, Mayor, some of these other funds.
The other piece, and this might be more of one of those traffic and DOT. At one point during COVID, you could ride around, and it was almost like a ghost town between here, Stage 1 Mooresville, right? And it feels like everything has started to pick up tremendously. So even in our town, it's like, I feel like the traffic has increased exponentially. And maybe it's because I'm home more during the day sometimes, and I can get out and see more of that traffic. But the traffic on 115, 21, particularly at that Flower House Houston Road interchange, to me is extremely dangerous. And I know it's on our list with CRTPO to get to get that straightened out and everything, but there might need to be something in the meantime, just, I don't know if it's flashing lights or a sign or something like that, telling people to slow down and allowing that turn on Flower House, because there's a lot of development and work that's being done on both Houston and Flower House that we've never, really had to deal with. So if there's a way for us to maybe work with DOT on some kind of traffic signal or information for folks to try to alleviate some of the safety issues that are, I'm afraid is going to happen there between those two intersections of Houston and Flower House, would be helpful.
They're absolutely having more accidents there to what you're saying, Mayor.
Okay.
It's a lot more than I think people would recognize.
Okay, anything else from council? Okay. If not, then we'll move on down to staff comments and business. We'll start with our revenue update. Ms. Sheila?
Okay, we've got your update before you, and I think it's fairly self-explanatory for you. Our revenue continued to hold up well. Our sales tax was 10,000 higher in February than it was February of last year. Property tax is down a little bit, about the same amount, but if you notice, January was so much higher than the year before. It's just the fact that there was not as much left to collect. So, and overall, year to date, we're well way ahead of.
I saw you about 103%
Yeah,
year to date.
yeah. It's come in extremely well. Water billing is also up compared to last year, so, and with the amount of customers we have coming through to pay their bills and sign up for new accounts, I can understand why it's up, because we've been extremely busy with collections.
Are tap fees included in that?
No, that's strictly monthly billing. But, unless you have questions, that's all I've got on the revenues.
Questions or?
We did receive a nice check of, for some availability fees in the Weathers Creek subdivision, which is getting cranked up. They had an open house and sold quite a few lots from what I understand, so they're reporting and getting ready to really gear up. That's the one right behind the charter school. So you can expect to see a lot of activity out there coming up short.
That moves us to item number 2, which is consider approval of resolution 0321 titled Resolution Authorizing the Filling of an Application for Approval of a Financing Agreement, Property Acquisition, which is authorized by General Statute 160A 20. Sheila?
Well, as you know, any issuance of debt requires local government commission approval, and this is one of their many requirements. A lot of hoops to jump through, but one of them is that the board approves a resolution authorizing us to apply for this funding. So therefore, we need to adopt this resolution.
So is there a motion to adopt this resolution for approval to give financing approval to the staff?
I'll make that motion.
Motion is made, received a second. Mr. Harris and Ms. Harris.
The Harris is the.
Yes.
The Harrises have spoken.
All right. Any question or comment? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item is setting a public hearing date.
And that's another of their requirements, that any issuance of debt must have a public hearing. And we're trying to get this done as quickly as possible. And as you know, the local government commission that actually has to meet and approve it, only meets once a month. And so, and it's the first Tuesday of each month. So there's no way we can get this done to meet their April meeting. So this is, because they have to have all the documents in hand a month before they meet, or 4 weeks before they meet. So to get on their May agenda, we have to have everything to them like the first week, I think the April
May 6th.
April 6th.
April 6th.
So therefore, we need to have a public hearing before the next board meeting, and we're asking you to set a date, sometime the week of the 22nd. Hold a public hearing on the issuance of debt for this property that was discussed at the retreat.
So, pull up my calendar as we talk.
And just to let you know, the night of the 22nd is the planning and zoning board, so at 7.
So can we do it on the 23rd? Anybody?
What day is that, Larry?
It's a Tuesday.
23rd, you say?
Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking afternoon?
4 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah.
4, okay. Everybody good with that date? All right. So can I have a motion to set the public hearing date for March 23rd,
At 4 o'clock,
4 o'clock?
I'll make that motion.
Motion's on the floor to set the public hearing date regarding issuance of debt for property acquisition for March 23rd at 4 p.m. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Motion's made, receive the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay. Next item is the overview of our upcoming regular March 11th meeting, agenda items. Mr. Wyatt?
As you all can tell, this agenda for today and Thursday is actually kind of quick. So this week, this month rather, is good, but next month, bring food and snacks. 'Cause it's gonna be, but on the one thing, and we've talked to Council Lady Harris, and she's been sent the email in reference to govoffice.web on our solutions, and we've talked to her briefly about that. And we're still proceeding with that. We've still got a couple things on our old website that we're still trying to get pulled off, and we're working through with those. We've already discussed briefly the naming rights policy that will be coming forth for you for the official reading, but the only thing different there is the formal reading of it. But as we discussed here today, the rec advisory committee discussed it at length and tried to go with Jane Comer Complex, but the reason it's Comer and Friends Complex is that's what Jan herself wanted. She just didn't feel appropriate having her name on it. And then having Kenny Overcash to go back to the Board of Adjustments as an inside member. And that will relatively be it. I had hoped to have word today as to our lots next door, price. Councilman Harris was in the office when you made the call Friday. I made a call again this afternoon and did not get through. to find out what, if any, price they was gonna tell us. If we get one, we may have to go into, session to discuss that price, but it should be a simple number, and it's up to you all to have that open session to accept it or not. I don't think, given the time frame based off of talking with Steve, it's one of those that he could, based off of these restraints we have for the loans, it would be better to package it all together and do it at one time versus separating them out. So with all that being said, either they're going to provide us a number that you all are acceptable to, or they won't. And if they're able to give us a number that you all like, then we can get that done by Thursday. And if they don't, then we won't, and we can move on. I will say, in talking to Councilman Harris and Councilman Now, they both have walked these other lots, physically walked the lots, and that's entirely up to you all as council, if that back piece is gonna be as important or not. So we'll just wait and see what number they propose at us. But to me, it's starting to get to this point, they think they have us over a barrel, or they're surely not wanting to give us the time frames. Because last week he was supposed to tell me something by Wednesday, and then it was Thursday, then it was Friday, and then it's Monday, and I'm still not getting the number. So I don't know what that means in their terms. I know what that means in my personal terms when somebody puts me off that many days. But that's all I've got for our agenda.
For the sake of conversation, let's just say we're not able to close a deal with the back front two. Do you think we could make that work with just the front two?
Yes, sir, with engineering, I really do. It may be one of those things, depending on what design council decides to go with, as far as it being a 25-year plan. Again, it just depends on what designs that is decided upon afterwards. But if you look at a simple two-story design, I absolutely think that there's plenty enough room that it can work with just the front portion. The only concern that I would have there, as the mayor and I have talked, the building itself would not be a problem at all. But then what would you do with parking? But again, we don't know 5 years or 7 years down the road, would they be parking on the other side that's available? Or we decide with the recent purchase that council has made, that this here could be a parking. I mean, once we have people come in and decide what it would actually take to redesign and reconfigure this building, I'm not certain what you all's options are best for the town, and going forward, as far as, do we keep it, or do we renovate it versus building the new? I mean, honestly, I'm not saying, because I don't know what those numbers are until we have experts come in and tell us what the numbers are. The shell of this building is fine, but just us being here, these offices are really hollow, and I can be in my office and I can hear what Jonathan is saying 4 offices down the hallway. And when it comes to police work, that tells me this building's not gonna work unless you do some serious renovations and knocking walls down and build them back to where you basically knock the interior completely down, and then you have an exterior shell. Well, that may work with some engineers, but then again, with today's codes, that may not work. They may say just knock the whole building down. Well, if they say knock the whole building down, it may be better to make this a parking lot and build a building somewhere else, is all I'm saying. And without having those actual numbers, I can't speculate. because I'm definitely not a builder, so I don't know at the end of the day what they would tell us if we can come in and make this better by redesigning it on the inside, or if they would come in and say, knock it down and make this a parking lot. If they did that, then that absolutely would work good over there by doing a two-story design in the front and make this a parking lot and then do the other building somewhere else. But they may very well say, two-story building there is fine, and then police department here is fine, and then maybe parking on the other side eventually would open up. But like, in talking to private conversation with the mayor, right now, my only concern is if we just got the front lot only, my biggest concern off the top of my head would be parking.
Lot of ifs.
Right.
Oh, yes, sir.
Lot of ifs.
Yes, sir.
Could we touch on this, Gov office,
Yes.
a little bit? Because, I don't exactly recall during the retreat when we were discussing it, if we were looking at the premium or the progressive prices.
We were definitely not looking at the premium.
Okay, okay. Because some of it, it's the same, but then when you get down to the boxes where it talks about the 3 years and everything, it's not.
Well, the 3 years, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. Where it's talking about, the total over 3 years and everything. I just, from what I looked or could see from it, there's not a lot of difference between those two, the progressive and the premium. But the main thing I think we were all looking for is to be able to manage the web page and keep it more updated than what it currently is.
Yes, ma'am.
And we would be able to do that with the progressive,
Yes, ma'am.
right? And then, is it something that the company has to do, or can Angela go in and do it?
To maintain it,
Or to change things?
Angela and Emily.
Okay,
What has got us in trouble in the past is most of the things that I have found out since I have gotten here is we have allowed a person to be in charge of things. And if one person is in charge of it, on the surface, that may sound great. But what happens if that person is sick or is on vacation or is no longer employed? We have found, for example, like Facebook page, a person who's no longer employed for 2 years here is still listed
as
on
the
it.
admin?
Yeah. And as long as those are good people, no harm, no foul. But what happens if one of those persons decides not to be a good person? And they are still admin or have access to things like that? That's just simply not a good way of doing business. And so going forward, the way that I have decided to do is most of these things, and our webpage is one of those, and this is not meant to be anything negative toward any current employee. It's just a good, safe way of doing business going forward, is that you should have two people that does these things. Worst case scenario, something horrific happens to an employee and they're no longer available, then you need somebody else that can still handle that business for our best interest of the town. And that's the best, cleanest way of saying that. But even if it was something more detrimental or harmful, you still need the best interest of the town protected. And for example, we had a economic development issue coming up, and they contacted me, a realtor contacted me and said, hey, per such and such on your website, this property is listed to be this type of zoning. Okay. I didn't go behind them and check them and verify what they said. I assumed what they did was fine. That was on our webpage, and it was out of date, and it's there. And then when I had said, hey, go to our webpage and take all these old documents off, the problem is Angela don't know what's old and what's not, because that's not her department. And that's what gets us into issues, because it's not fair that we've got somebody over here running this part, but then we've got things on there that don't belong, because somebody else is not doing that. So, the progressive will work, and yes, it is managed by us, but now we have two people doing it, which is Emily and Angela. I even thought the value would work, but it gives us more options if we go with that middle one to change the pictures. And even talking with Council Lady Harris, we talked, I think it was Thursday maybe, last about it, and it gives us more options and freedoms to change things. And a couple of the websites that they gave on there is people that gave them recommendations. If you all check those out, most of those are those progressive sites. And that's the luxury that allows, whether it be Emily or Angela currently, to go in and change those, is it allows them to change those pictures. It also allows you, when you go to use your phones to pull the website up, then you can see what's happening there better by your smartphones when you see those too.
Okay. Just wanted to know if everybody was happy with that.
Yes, sir.
I'm fine, Angela, I'm fine with that, and Emily. Who would inform them, as you say, Angela, of course, knows her department. Emily, I'm sure knows a lot, but still and yet, there may be some fine things in there that she may not be aware of. My question being is, who will these various things that do get old and, are not moved in a reasonable length of time or changed, whatever, tweaked, who will keep these people informed? I mean, will everybody be responsible on staff to go through it from time to time and look at it from their own perspective, expertise, their department, and say, this is no longer, this needs to be tweaked, no longer valid, this sort of thing? You understand where I'm coming from?
Oh, yes,
so
sir.
that they are able to keep things up to date.
Yes, sir, absolutely they will. And each department head's going to, kind of like our social media pages, each department head's going to be responsible for their own information that gets forwarded to either one of these two people. And that's the other part that we've got to be careful of. Even though we've got two people, some people may go to Emily, for example, other people may go to Angela. We don't want that to get crossed out, and let's assume that I'm going to always go to Angela for my information. Well, if I never talk to Emily, she don't know what I did or didn't do. So we will have a process in place there that it's cross-checked, so that it is kept up to date information.
People will talk to each other.
Absolutely, and we will go to use Steve, for example. He may not have the information that needs to be updated weekly, but he may have information that needs to be updated quarterly. And once he puts something in there, does something need to come out? And that's a question that needs to be asked, whatever that is. If it's a quarterly report, does an old quarterly report need to be removed? Because that's one of the things we have found out on the old website. When somebody gave Angela something to put on there, nobody told her to take anything out, so she didn't. I mean, it's as simple as that. Nobody told her to take it out. So we got stuff that's been on there 9 years that didn't need to be there.
On the subject, of course, again, I presume we're talking to Progressive, and that's fine, I agree. But down under optional, under the green box, you've got the biannual accessibility review, add $750 per year, communication suite, and then several things there in parentheses, add $1,200 a year. Are you and staff recommending that, or just the $12,500 per year for that top box?
What page you on?
I'm on page 17.
think you had mentioned the 1,200 would be good to set out as mass communications when you were talking this last meeting.
That's one question we hope to have you an answer before Thursday. At this point, I don't know that we want to add that $1,200 on just yet, and we want confirmation from them, and we have not gotten that answer yet. We may, and Thursday I will have that answer to you. We still had some questions about that. As the mass communications evolves, we absolutely, because we do like with bad weather and things like that, we absolutely love it and want that form of communications. But there was something that I read in there, I don't think they were quite ready for that just yet. Or I didn't think we was ready for that just yet. But there was a question in that, it's the .0075 per message for bulk text messaging. And it may be that we have to do that once we sign up. And if we do, then yes, we will ask for it. But at this point, I know we definitely don't have all that information in our database. But yes, sir, we definitely wanted to add it going forward, but I didn't know if we could tell them we wanted time to collect the information and the phone numbers from the citizens, because it'll take us a while to collect it. Right now, we don't have all these phone numbers to start using. So if they would allow us 6 months to a year before we add that component on there, that's what I was saying. I wanted to give us time to collect the numbers before we started paying for the information without being able to use it.
Yeah, they should give you that option to add that later as opposed to having to do it like right now.
And prorate it?
Right, exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Well, now, are we talking both the 750 and 1,200, or just the 1,200?
The 750 we need to go ahead and add. We need to add that part, but if they will allow us to add the 1,200 later, that's what I was wanting to hold off on. If they will allow us to do that and give us time to bank the phone numbers and let the citizens know that we do need their phone numbers and why we're wanting to add them. Because there's a lot of people like me. My number that's registered through the town is my landline house number. They don't have my cell phone number through the town.
Okay.
The only thing I would say is when I review the security parts of it, it looks tight. So I'm good with that from that perspective. That was my main concern with the project. I mean, they will maintain and monitor that and make sure DOD compliance. So, and I was gonna state pretty much what you said on the ADA compliance piece, that needs to be there. So, thanks for making sure that that's an option.
I have a question. You're gonna bring information back on Thursday, if you already wanna pull this for consent?
No,
Put it on regular? Okay.
The only thing that we will leave it on consent. The only thing we don't know is if it's going to include the 1,200 or not.
Any other questions about Thursday night's agenda? Okay. If not, I think that concludes all of our business tonight.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Motion's
second.
Motion made, received a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Now I gotta get my wife to.
Any opposition? Motion